Our next speaker comes from the Society of Swedish Literature in Finland, Head of Unit Johan Pyy. Welcome, Johan.
Hello, everyone. All right. Once again, my name is Johan Pyy. I work at the Society of Swedish Literature in Finland. It's a very, very long name. That's why we use the abbreviation SLS most of the time. It stands for Svenska Litteratursällskapet in Finland. Since this is an international crowd, you might not be familiar with the languages in Finland. We are a bilingual country. 5% of the population speaks about Swedish, so that's part of the reason that we have a Society of Swedish Literature in Finland as well. We were founded back in 1885, so we've been around for a very long time. And I work as head of unit at the archives. We have one archive here in Helsinki, just a stone's throw away from here, about 300 meters, and another one in Vaasa. As head of unit, my title is head of unit, and I'm in charge of customer service and audiences. I do a lot of stuff, but mostly my main task is to make sure that our archives get used. Opening up the archives, that's what I'm going to talk about today. And you hear a lot about these words. These words are thrown around a lot, opening up the archives, showing up our hidden treasures, bringing out the cultural heritage from the archives. But what does it really mean? I was in Iceland a few weeks ago, and then there was almost the same talks about opening up the archives. And this is nothing really new, at least not for us, because I found this quote from Ernst Lagus. He was a SLS board member, 1908, 110 years ago. He said, and I quote him, "It can't be that the work that has been put into the Swedish folklore in Finland should be buried and as good as inaccessible, hidden away in the archives. It can't be that the material that has been gathered by such high costs should be used by only one or two researchers." That was said 110 years ago, but it still rings true today. The same vision applies, and you can hear it in the coffee table at work, during conferences. Nothing has really changed. But the way we do this have changed. Back in Ernst's day, opening up the archives meant to make a book, and that's what they did. They started going through these old folklore archives that we have, and the result of this was Finlandssvenska folkdiktning. It's consisting of 21 volumes, and it was a really, really long project. It was made from 1909 to 1969, so it took 60 years to make this project. And that was how we used to do it. Back in the day, when you opened up the archives, you made a book. Perhaps you made an exhibit, or you made the books because it should be accessible for researchers. This would make them be more productive, so they didn't have to go through the archives. And this worked well. This worked really well for the 110 years that we've been around. It was perhaps the only way to open up the archives. And what happened then? Then along came the internet, and it changed everything. It changed the whole business model for archives. We know, although it's been around for 30 years soon in the web, it isn't really clear what our purpose is and how we should benefit from this. And often we find ourselves not really sure where we are going, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Also, on the archive conference in Iceland a few weeks, I was listening to the keynote from John Sheridan from the National Archives of the United Kingdom, and he told us that the best time in archives is right now. And I agree with him completely. Never before have we had the possibilities to truly open up our archives and reach out to all our users and gain a broader customer base and make sure that archives really are used by more than a few researchers, like Ernst Lagus said back in 110 years. But of course, it has made some other things as well. It has also made it much harder to reach out to your audiences in an ever-competing case to get your attention. But one thing is sure, we can't use the old model that we have used for the last 100 years this day. We have to be much more active in getting in contact with our users. And we have to have meaningful interfaces. We have to be lower the threshold to contact the archives. So what really has happened since the web came is that everybody has gotten used to easy access to everything. This has changed. And we have more competitions. Archives no longer have a monopoly in granting access to history. Back for the last 100 years, we had a sort of archives and museum had a monopoly on the cultural heritage. You had to go to the archives to find this cultural heritage. But now this has changed. And the way people are consuming this cultural heritage has also changed. But most of us are familiar with different Facebook groups. Every town, borough, or state has their own Facebook group where people are sharing old photographs in, and people are in that way consuming, the general public are consuming the cultural heritage to these groups. So why should this general public go through the hassle of going to the archives when they can get their dose of cultural heritage directly from their mobile phone through Facebook and that sort of stuff? And we have also for scholars, of course, they will come to our archives, that's for sure. But perhaps it's already gotten to the point that if we don't have our materials online, they will write about something else. They also have smaller travel budget these days and so on, so they might take something that is easily accessible instead of going to just your archive. And I truly believe that if we don't evolve the way we do stuff, then we will lose a lot of our former customer base. But then again, all this is perhaps a good thing, because competition, it forces us also to evolve and change the way we do our things, because that's what competition does. And what do we mean at SLS by opening up the archives? And how I see this is that we have to add visibility to the archive material, mainly through marketing and communications. And then we absolutely have to lower the threshold to come to the archives, both in real life and digitally. And also you do that through marketing and communications. And I'm going to speak much about lowering the threshold. And here are the list of the topics I'm going to talk about today that we are doing. We have in April, we have opened a customer service chat on our search interface. Then later this fall, we are opening a bank of ideas, more about this later. And then thirdly, in January, we also started using this Finna interface, our own sort of search interface that uses Finna, and then more of that later. But we're going to start off with the chat. Most of us have become familiar with this sort of chats. They're on online shops, on banks, insurance companies use them. They're mostly everywhere these days, and there's a reason for that, because it helps these companies to sell their products. So the same applies also to us as an archive, because the main thing that these do is that they lower the threshold to contact the archives. You don't have to go through the hassle of writing or calling, because it's a much higher threshold to write an email than to call somebody when you're searching for something. Especially for the young people, that are the researchers of tomorrow. They are scared to death of speaking on the phone, so they prefer this chat to get in contact with organizations and business. Of course, there's a few people who also dislikes these kind of communications, but they're in a clear minority, and they probably will also get used to these because they get more common all the time. I believe libraries have used these on Finland as well, but I think we are the first archives in Finland to start using a chat for a customer service. And this is an example how it works. This is a user here has found a picture from the Civil War in 1918 from our digitalized collections on Finna. And you can see that the chat is always there. It follows the user around when he's manned. And it's a very, very easy way to ask questions about this specific material that you have up there. For instance, this user may not be familiar with what CC BY 4.0 means, the licenses. So it's a really quick way that you can just ask our customer service, and they will quickly give him an answer. And anything else you can have a question about, you can just ask our archivist that is manning the chat at the moment. But really the main thing and the best part of this chatting isn't that you get the correct or a quick answer directly when you are on our website. Perhaps the most important thing is creating leads that will somehow get the customer to actually come and look at some archive material, because here's a good example of some collection that we have in our archives, and you can see the metadata doesn't really tell much about this thing. It just tells it some kind of tradition material. It's 42 pages, 0.1 shelf meters, and there are some topic words here. And this is where the best part of the chat is, that you can easily then ask and quickly, if this is something that the customer might be interested in, they can really have a low threshold to write there, do you have more information about this? And we at the archive can then quickly get more information and at least get them hooked and create a lead so they actually come to the archives later on. Because our 2 kilometer shelf material that we have, just a small part of it has very good metadata. So the usual situation would look something like this, that they don't really know perhaps what is there. So that's where the chat comes in, and it's sort of help them find a good lead, and perhaps they can visit us someday. And that seems also to be the experience that we have since we opened this in April. We haven't really started marketing yet, but we have also already seen a lot of customers that go look at something online. We can follow them where they are, so look especially where they are at the moment, and they ask us, do you have more of this kind of material? And then we can answer yes, and they have come later on and visited us and looked at the stuff that is not already digitalized. So this is a very, very smooth and great way to gain more customers and to also get out where the customer is and have a direct dialogue with them. And once again, the main point is not getting the correct help in a short amount of time, but creating these leads that the customers will come to your archive. And here's more of the chat. As I said, we were the first archive in Finland that opened a chat customer service implemented on a Finna website in April 2018, so be free to check it out and try it if you want to. And it's also the preferred means of communication for millennials and Generation Z. In other words, the students that today are at the university and will be the scholars of tomorrow. So I see it important to get these as quickly as possible familiar with our services and show us that we are a modern archive, and we are keen to give them great service and by their favorite means of communications. Yeah. Chat users. Not many at all. We have perhaps 5 or something like that per week, but we haven't started marketing it yet. So we open it slowly. So we see later on in the autumn we have planned some marketing campaigns for all this that I'm going to talk about later. So hopefully we're going to see more. And again, the chat client that we use is Talk2. It's free to use. It's really simple to set up. Also, it can be set up on any site. You don't have to have it on a Finna search engine or something like that. It's just a website. It's simple to set up. So I can highly recommend it. And our chat is also open Monday to Friday. When the archive customer service always is open, it's also manned by an archivist during these hours. And in case, if you go to the Finna site later, after 4 o'clock, then it's a regular response form that you can fill in, and we'll get back to the customer later on. So that was about the chat. The second thing I'm going to talk about that we're also implementing is the Bank of Ideas. It's translated from Idébanken, which is the Swedish name for this project. And it's a project that started off, it's a website where we list potential subjects, for example, for bachelor or master thesis, based on our archive materials. And it's going to be an undersite on the Finna site. And we started planning this project during the winter, because I also remembered very well from my own time at the university, and I could recall that it wasn't so easy when you were supposed to write your bachelor thesis. I studied Nordic history, and with that study Nordic history, we are forced to use archive materials in our theses. So we have a high demand for archive materials, and I remember I was a bit stressed out. Many of my friends were also a bit stressed out that are we going to find something? That was a silly question. Now that I've started working in this business, of course, there's lots of interesting stuff to write about, but truly students are a bit stressed out about this kind of things. And not once during our time at the university did we get an email or a presentation from an archive that marketed their material to us during this time. So we had the demand for archive materials, and the archives have the supply, but they didn't meet because there weren't any communications from that things. And that's kind of sad, really, because there are lots of potential here, and there's also much potential if a student picks a topic from your archives, and he's going to write about it much later on, also when they go on to get a doctoral degree or something like that. So I see this as big potential also. So we started planning this project. We were also in close contact with the professors at the universities. We were mainly in contact with the University of Helsinki and also Åbo Akademi University, because we wanted, of course, their feedback on this project. And we also wanted to sneak market to the whole project to them also that this is going on. So they are waiting for it now in the fall. And we got really, really great feedback from them. Everybody was positive. Of course, there were some voices that said, the history side said that the history material for the history student is a bit hidden there. Then from the music sciences, they said the music material might be a bit hidden, and the literature studies said that the literature study might have a hard time finding it. Everybody said that their specific material was a bit hard to find, so we see if we can try to fix it, or I believe it will not be a problem, really. And I see this also as a win deal for everyone, because the students, they will no longer have to stress about picking a good topic to write about. And the professors, they have all been when we contacted them, been very, very glad, because they don't have to take time to find a topic for their students, so they don't have to focus on that bit. And we, as an archive, we will get our material out there. We have opened up the archives, and somebody comes to use them, so that is really great for us as well. And here are some examples of this idea bank of ideas that we have. And this is an example where we recommend a topic about the war, children of war. During the Second World War in Finland, we had thousands of children that were sent away to Sweden because they were scared that the Soviet Union was going to occupy Finland. And here we lift up this as a good topic that could easily be a master thesis. And we also give some examples how you should tackle this sort of subject, like instance here at how do these children describe their time in their diaries as children of war, how did they feel the situation when they went there, and so on and so on. It's a good topic for history. And here, archivmaterial, archive material, there you see the archives and the collections that we are picking up. And since this is also on our search interface, these can also be linked later on, so they can go directly into these materials. If they're digitalized, they can also see the materials, but we see big potential in this thing. And as you also can see, the chat is also there hanging around, so it will be a small step for the student to also contact us for more information about this. But of course, we are not taking the role of taking the guidance role of the professors at the universities here. We are just giving tips on our archive materials, and we're very clear about that also in our communication about this. Here's another example of this sort of theme. This is about household books from the 19th century to the 21st century. You can pick this sort of books and see differences between social classes from these books. A great way to tackle a topic, and I hope so we'll get some students that are interested in these things. And then the basis for all of this is our search interface on sls.finna.fi. We heard the great presentation on Finna already by Miia and Pia. And we started using this in January. We launched this. We see it as a very user-friendly search interface, custom interface. It was, like they said, it's developed by the National Library of Finland, and it was launched in January 2018. Prior to this, we had our material open on finna.fi. You can find it that way, but now we have our own search engine with the chat and other topics that we're going to put on sls.finna.fi. I see the best part of this new kind of search interface this year, getting more and more common, is that they are very simple to use. It's sort of a Google-like interface with just one row where you search for the material. And it's very easy to use. You don't need several hours of schooling in this, nor do you need to read a big manual every time you're going to search in it. And it finds results quite well. Because this is how it used to look like. This is our own old search interface where you had different kinds of forms which you fill out. You weren't really sure what this all meant. First you picked the collection, then you could search for names and places, context, topics, and so on. So this was perhaps the old way to do it. That it was. You can see that it was developed by somebody who already knew what to search for specifically. So that's the old way, and the new one it's much more simpler and better. And we have already seen that when we launched the Finna site, and it took only 4 months, or was it 4 months, and it had as much visitor as the old one had during a whole year. So it has also given us much more new users. And another great thing about it is you can also create these sort of collections here that you can lift up different kinds of materials, create sort of an exhibit from it at all. There's, for instance, Sakris Topelius had a 200-year jubilee here earlier this year, and it was very very well visited, and we have also made other collections except from the Civil War that was 100 years ago. And I was like, well, this is a great way to use Finna as well. We used to use Flickr for this, but it wasn't really a productive thing because Flickr you had to manually upload the pictures there and so on. Now we have it all in one place, so it's much more productive. And yes, I'm really grateful for this Finna ability that we can make this sort of search interface because it saves us a lot of time. It works really great, and we can also have an impact how the National Library also develop their different services on Finna. And it's highly customizable, like we can implement the chat and so on there. Seems to be some problem with the slides. Yeah, over to the conclusions now. I think the biggest conclusions that we need to do as a small private archive is we need to go where our users are. We can't no longer wait for them to find us. If they are on Facebook in groups, we have to go to those Facebook groups. We have to write Wikipedia articles and so on. As an archive, that's big roles that we have to take, and we have to be much better in marketing our service and our archives better to these users. And not the least, we need easy-to-use interfaces for our customers, because every search starts away from the archives. And the farther you get in that step, the higher chance there is that the user is going to come to your archives and use your materials. And on that note, I would like to thank.